This podcast is owned and operated by the RCR Association, a private third party to the Department of National Defense. The content of this podcast is the responsibility of the RCR Association and does not necessarily reflect the views or policies of the Government of Canada. The official emblems of the regiment are used with the permission of Regimental Headquarters, the RCR.
Okay, I got 1400 on my watch, so we're going to kick off with our Royal Canadian Regiment, Canadian Army Modernization discussion with the panel we have today. Today is the 9th of December, the afternoon right before regimental mess dinners for both the officers and the non-commissioned officers here in Petawawa. So great to be back in Petawawa. Today I have with me Colonel John Summerfield, currently on the National Security Program, former CO of 1 RCR. We have Chief Warrant Officer Sealock, Brigade Sergeant Major here at 2 Canadian Mechanized Brigade Group, former Regimental Sergeant Major of the 3rd Battalion. We have Chief Warrant Officer McSpadden, the RSM of the 3rd Battalion currently, and Master Warrant Officer Larock, the Operations Sergeant Major of the 3rd Battalion. Also in the room with us, helping us out from a podcast perspective, we got Corporal Moreau behind the camera and Corporal Wallace helping us out on Teams. So I mentioned the date that we are filming for two reasons, really, because we are live streaming this through Microsoft Teams for those that can dial in, but we are also recording this for the RCR Association podcast. And I'm stepping in as a guest host while Sergeant Manny Singh is away, having component transferred, and he's down in Southern Ontario completing training for Peel Regional Police. So we wish him all the best. He's still keeping in touch with all of us in the podcast team, watching us continue on with the great work out of this initiative. So here's how today's going to work. I'm going to provide a bit of a overview on Canadian Army modernization. I'm going to take 10 minutes for those of us in the room and online to kind of go through modernization in a broad sense. And that'll set the foundation for us to have just a very relaxed conversation, and we'll kind of see where it goes. And I'll be the host, and I'll moderate the conversation as we go and guide it. But there's no real set agenda. We want to talk to issues that are important to us as a regiment and important to our soldiers as the end users of modernization. So my first question, and I think I'll probably look to our NCOs to give us a bit of ground truth on that, is so I just went over Army modernization. Are you starting to see signs in the lines of modernization hitting the brigade and hitting the battalions? Are the troops aware of it? Are they asking questions about it? Do they know the trajectory that the Army is moving on? And I'll just remind you to, if you want to answer it, just grab the bayonet microphone system the boys sorted us out with here, and let's open up the discussion. Is it known?
Well, first ask the bayonet.
Ask the bayonet. I like it.
Really awkward. Sir.
Are we on there? I just want to make sure we're on. Yeah, we're good. Okay.
In principle, are they tracking? I think yes. I think, like everyone else, we as the leadership probably have a long way to go in how we're educating them and getting the details down to them. But ultimately, Army modernization, you can feel the shift from the way our brigade command teams talk to us, to our CO about the need for us to get back on essentially what I would relate to a wartime footing, being able to put soldiers into major combat operations, being able to actually provide lethality on the battlefield. This message has getting down to the troops. I believe you can see the shift in the mentality on the floor. I do believe is starting to come to the realization that everyone from the private all the way up understands the fact that our job is dangerous. it's on us to do everything we can to prepare ourselves to uh, for the day that we have to go back and conduct these operations in a real theater of war. So I think in principle, it's the message is starting to get down to the soldiers. I think they're starting to see it. Ultimately, though, young soldiers, they measure success in results, right? So I think that's kind of the challenge of leadership is how we continue to educate and message it to them, but also, and I love the commander's aggressive nature in this, as you said. We're starting to, like, next year. This is going to start. This isn't a long term. It's going to take a while to get to where we need to be, but we're going to start seeing effects next APS.
Yeah.
And we're already seeing the mentality shift now. So I think that combined, so yes, it's in motion, but we still have some work to do with getting it completely down to their level. Yeah.
Yeah, it's and rest assured, from my vantage point at Army headquarters, we recognize that it won't be real to the soldiers, the people that need to understand the message, until they have the equipment in their hands, and the uniforms, and the personal protective equipment they require to do their job. Every cub that I sit in, every modernization update brief, it is the leadership around the table saying, like, we need to move faster to get that stuff to the soldiers. And we recognize that that is the tangible example that they're going to take to be like, okay, we're actually moving in the right direction. I think a lot of the stuff with regards to the lethality and getting onto a warfighting footing is stuff that I found encouraging to hear the language shift. And I feel like our non-commissioned officers have kept your head in the game for this for since I was a second lieutenant. You've reminded everyone in the regiment about this, and in the Army. But it's nice to see the language across the Army and the CAF shift towards this. I think I've certainly seen it. I'm wondering if any of our other panelists have seen that shift within your spheres. Colonel Summerfield, you're on National Security Program right now. Anything that you're seeing in your
Well, from my level, what I see is that there's a lot of work being done in from across the board, whether it's at the Army level, whether it's like at the formation level, or from really my perspective is more from a general CAF perspective. And what we hear a lot about in like from the Ottawa or from like the strategic level is about the opportunity. And I don't think that that's the right like personally way to classify it. I see it as a necessity. We think about the opportunity is really to destroy the sacred cows that exist. Like you had mentioned in your presentation with the Army commander, it's about the future. There's a lot of the things that there's a lot of baggage that we're pulling behind that we've been doing just because we've been doing, and it's been working well for us. And that can in that in the approach that we've taken, which is about participation, it's about coalition. But now we're talking about war fighting. We're talking about what we need to do to fight and win on our own. And that allows us, and it's going to take all levels of the chain of command. It's going to take from the section up to the platoon, to the company, to the units, to determine what are the things that we've been doing in the past that we need to hold on to, and what are the things that we need to let go. Where do we need to concentrate our training? You can't do everything anymore, and that's the approach. Core war fighting is core war fighting, and we get back to those basic principles. We'll be able to see a focus and a precision and a purpose. I think that'll be a tangible, easy mechanism for the chain of command to show progress. Is that we're pushing and we're taking risk with these things that we've always done, and we're going to now focus in on the basics.
Yeah, there's a couple of things you said there that really resonate with me. One of the things is when we're talking to various audiences about this, and I'm explaining what I mean from moving from contribution operations to major combat operations, is explaining to them that it's no longer, we can't be in the mindset of contributions of choice anymore. When we're when we're committing soldiers to conflicts, it's a deliberate choice. But we've been able to pick and choose a lot of times where we committed to. And now we're moving into a conversation where this is not going to be choice anymore. It's going to be necessity. And Canada needs to be ready for that. And the Army needs to be ready to defend Canada's sovereignty overseas with our allies, but also at home in Canada. And that's the message that we've been saying. The other aspect that you talked about is we can't do everything all the time. And that was clear in the mission analysis done at Army headquarters when they decided to move from our current divisional structure, which we all know any of our key allies would not recognize these as actual divisions that we currently have. These are administrative divisions. We are moving towards warfighting division structure for both defensive Canada as well as maneuver. And they're focused. They're focused on those tasks so that we're not trying to do everything all the time and trying to have commanders have their focus shifted between multiple different competing priorities. Yeah. Anybody have anything to add to that? No? Okay. Yeah, that's a great opening to the conversation. So, I think one of the things that I'd like to talk about a little bit is, so when we talk about how we're maturing our conversation towards this, owning our part as the profession of arms in Canada, we're starting to be a bit more vocal about the threat. And talking about the threat as we see it and our assessment of the threat as the profession of arms. And I certainly see it from the highest levels, from the Chief of Defense Staff, and even from our minister and our deputy minister. And I've always seen it at the lowest levels, learning from people like yourselves that are non-commissioned officers and those that are returning from conflicts. I'm wondering how much our battalions are able to learn right now from the war in Ukraine, from our soldiers coming back from places like Unifier and Reassurance, and bringing some of those lessons learned into the training here in the 2nd Canadian Mechanized Brigade Group. Are we seeing that? Mr. Seelock, you want to?
Sure, I'll take a go at it. I'll answer yes. For based on our recent tempo, I think it's very evident, being on the floor with soldiers in all 3 battalions, the experience brought back firsthand from both Reassurance and Unifier. And I think they're seeing it, especially on forward missions like Union, where soldiers got to learn a different way of different warfighting function per se, a bit of a hybrid style. Brings unique skill sets, renewed engagement. Soldiers had a lot more sense of agency in that mission, and continues to with the current evolution of Unifier where it is. And I think Reassurance, after seeing them just recently, with the amount of exposure they get to the multinational environment and actually training with a full suite of enablers, equipment, and the real-time training, they're definitely coming back better trained. My point of view in all of this is, well, I'll just give you Sergeant Major Seelock's point of view in all this is, if we look at all of the regiment's history and operations, I think but we are doing it, is how focused are we on one part of the world versus being adaptable for any other operational environment where we could receive a task for. And I think the Army is heading in the right direction with creating that light infantry regiment, which can be multi-purposed, and eventual combat service and support to give the Army flexibility to react to incidents around the world, wherever the government in Canada decides to position us. So, great opportunity where we are right now in the Eastern Europe operational environment, but I think we need to maintain adaptability, which we're doing right now with 3rd Battalion going to get more specialty training in the Arctic.
Yeah.
With our partner in Alaska. So I think we're heading in the right direction.
Yeah, and you bring up a great point. When we talk about the commanders, and really it's Government of Canada, CAF D&D, like priority theaters being Canada and our Arctic as number 1. And then we have the Euro-Atlantic, where we're heavily committed right now, as well as the Indo-Pacific, right? So what I can say, as we went through Army modernization and the analysis that happened through the Army modernization team, we sent team members into all of those theaters to gain lessons learned from our key allies. So specifically the Aussies, UK, as well as the Americans, to see how they have gone through their own modernization efforts in the last 5-10 years. And that those relationships are currently, so the Army Modernization team holds a lot of the relationships from a modernization perspective, but I know for a fact that 3 Div, soon to be the Maneuver Division in Edmonton, with Brigadier General Rutland and their team, have those division to division relationships now. And for example, the First Division in Australia just completed one of their exercises and for division level validation, and we received a lot of the lessons learned from them. So we're incorporating that into our process for another theater right in the Indo-Pacific. So it's we're conscious of where we have soldiers committed, primarily in Europe, in Eastern Europe, but we're also ensuring that we don't lose our eye on the number one priority in the Arctic and in Canada, as well as periphery theaters in the Indo-Pacific. Anybody have anything to add to that? Yeah, Sergeant Major.
Yes, sir. I would just add, I think a lot of it, that's one thing we're good at in terms of ARs and getting a lot of the feedback to the units, and it shows with the initiatives, the drones that the units are having and in mortars and those types of capabilities, because the NCOs are good at driving things from the ground up.
Yeah.
However, I think where we struggle is that implementation at higher levels, right? Is getting the speed of getting the equipment and the things that we need, to function. And I do believe the system that we're getting into is going to address a lot of those issues. Yeah. So that's what I would leave you with.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Something that the one way that I like to describe it is, I've never seen such clarity at the strategic level on this is the direction we need to go. And it's been reinforced by generational level investment in defense. And then at the tactical level, everything you're saying is that we have the soldiers and the tactical level units that are ready to get after it and get us the equipment so we can train on it and get ready for our job. It's that middle level, oftentimes red tape and bureaucracy that we need to punch through. And that it's recognized at Canadian Army Headquarters. One of the initiatives that it'll get its legs under it, but we recognize our procurement system is broken. They stood up the Defense Investment Agency. It's still getting its legs under it, but at least there's a recognition that the system we had was broken and we need to do something different. We need to have disruptors in there that are going to break through that red tape and get the tools into our soldiers' hands. One example that I'll provide is I don't know if you've heard of Project Minerva yet, if it's hit the streets here. But Project Minerva is basically the Army commanders' plan to flood the Army with drones to make sure that our soldiers have drones in their hands and it's seen as a disposable item. We just did an industry day in Ottawa with over 200 members of defense industry from across Canada that attended and spoke to us about drones and how to break through that procurement system to get it into our soldiers' hands. And I think we're starting to see those results, at least I've heard great things from how 4Div is looking at it and the amount of money that your division commander has put towards making sure that your soldiers have drones, and hopefully it gets on the floor soon to meet the commander's intent to flood the Army with them. Sir, you had something you wanted to add?
Yeah, what I wanted to add was that I think that at the tactical, the low tactical level in the units, soldiers have known, NCOs, officers in those units have known for a long time that there's been something wrong. And I think that at the unit level, there has been a singular focus, despite the resource gaps that have existed, to try to focus on core warfighting skills and to ensure that with the equipment we had, we were as tactically relevant as we could. I think right now, through modernization, what we're finally seeing is the resourcing and the focusing at the higher levels.
Yeah.
That's going to enable that progress to achieve. And I think, and you brought up about disruptive, but disruptive innovation is also occurring right now. We see it in Ukraine, and no one in this room is an expert on that, even though we're much more senior. And so there is a humbleness that has to come with as we develop this in the unit level, to actually take risks, to enable those corporals, those master corporals, those sergeants at the low tactical level who are experimenting with this, not to have a little bit of creativity. And as we insert these capabilities into the units, to not try to impose all the things that we knew of the past of how the army was developed in the early 2000s and how we progressed. And that's the opportunity that I see of the sacred cow, is that as we're flooding, as we're recognizing the fact that we have the ability to take on these new capabilities, that we as a chain of command, we don't tie the hands of innovation of these potentially creative solutions just because that's the way that we did it. And I think that there's a lot of potential within the units and a lot of creativity that I've seen when I've been in them of people coming up with great solutions to problems. But the but what we've had in my generation was a resource gap that didn't allow us to explore them. It's finally here, so we can take advantage of this and the opportunity. We could potentially deliver a unit, an infantry battalion, whether light or mechanized of the future, which is actually future driven
Yeah.
and not looking backwards.
Yeah. Yeah. And I want to dive deeper into that soldier level innovation. So at the Army level, our unit in Kingston, Calwick, Canadian Army Land Warfare Center. Did I get it right? Yeah. So Calwick in Kingston, Canadian Army Land Warfare Center, as of next summer through Army Modernization, is also going to stand up within our line of governance for strategy, Cost Army Strat. They are going to stand up a experimentation and innovations cell unit that is going to look at this from an Army L1 perspective. So the Army is doing their bit. But we know that in the best innovations happening on the ground with the soldiers working with what they have. And on one of the previous podcasts the team did, and it was Sergeant Singh that was the host for it. And I can't remember who he was interviewing. It might have been Chief Warrant Officer Burns. I'm not sure, but Manny brought up a great point about how the infantier is like the entrepreneur of the current battle space. They see opportunities out there, they see gaps, and then they exploit those gaps with the tools they have at their disposal. And the person who can do it the fastest is going to win on the battle space. How is the level of innovation and acceptance of innovation right now in our battalions and within 2 Brigade? Anybody want to take a stab at that? Mr. McSpadden?
I'm just going to give an example, and it comes under Mr. Seelock's time in 3rd Battalion. You look at with what the 3rd Battalion did with the M-Razor fleet and the innovation with the adaptation for not only tow, but now what we're looking at with even mortars and the ULTV fleet coming in and taking a product, looking at where it's deficient for our needs, and soldiers on the ground actually coming up with real world solutions that will actually make us more lethal on the battle space. Well, we've seen these examples already, and that continues to move forward. It's amazing to watch how soldiers look at a problem and can come up with these solutions to it. It's fun to watch.
So I remember my time in the 3rd Battalion at like a while ago, well, when we were there together, and we were writing out those reports for capability deficiency reports, I think they were called, to say like, hey, this is the capability we're deficient of, and this is what we as the warfighters feel we need. And then we never really saw anything from that. Are you seeing a quicker flash to bang with like, hey, deficiency, we need to get it answered? Are we seeing that anywhere?
Stop it. Make it objectors now. So I think a big change from when I was a younger NCO to today is I've seen a lot of walls come down.
Okay.
To tolerance of disciplined initiative at the soldier level, where leaders are enabling their young, smart soldiers to fill the capability gaps that Arsene McSpadden just mentioned. He mentioned a couple of examples. I'll tell you another one that my commander just signed 2 days ago. Was the Army has an existing IFF capability gap.
Yeah.
And they just created one. The 3rd Battalion just created one, and they're about to apply it to Arctic dress, which we've never had one before.
Awesome.
A marking of fighting forces with white tops. We compared multinational countries, all look the same. So small things like that carry us a long way. That gathers the tow M Razor project gathered attention at the Army level, to the point where a model was made now that should be force employed. So I think the space that we're in today, where leadership empowers disciplined initiative, will take us a long way if we continue on that path. And because the majority of these ideas that are coming up enables commanders, we're bridging the shooter to sensor gap a lot faster. And I think, yes, procurement is slow. All those things are slow, but as long as we don't stifle innovation, I think we'll continue on the right trajectory.
Yeah. Yeah, it's I think it was cultural. I think you hit on it. We are now in a point in the Army, at least from what I've been able to see, kind of through all of you, is that it's almost rewarded or celebrated when we're able to achieve those innovation milestones. And so when you have that type of culture within a brigade and in a unit, then the troops feel empowered, and there's a little bit of risk acceptance to try new things. And then when you do, it's recognized at the unit and brigade level and beyond. Because trust me, as Canadian Army Strategic Communications, I'm looking for any example of innovation that I can highlight across Ottawa of how the Army is moving forward and enabling soldiers. Yeah, Jeff?
The only thing I would add is when you look at some of the old documents we used to have, like what was the last time we had an Army modernization? Was it close engagement, like adaptive dispersed operations? I don't remember that ever once coming down. When they were written for people who sit in force development offices to say, here's the future. You guys go and design this and then give this to the field force, and the field force just kind of has to accept what you've come up with. And yes, there was supposed to be the feedback loops, but I don't think they really worked quite the same way as they do now. And I think there's another opportunity. So even though like the modernization team's work has got us moving in the right direction of like identifying big rocks to go in the rucksack, a division structure that allows us to do things properly. You have the ability with certain light forces to make sure you have flexibility of your operations. Where I think some of this ties together with something else that's probably going to come out in the next year through the Army is the Army warfighting concept. So a big piece I think that's kind of like needs to cohere all of this is, so we've sort of identified the threat. We know we have all these kind of characteristics of the way the fight's been going either in Ukraine or where we think it's going to go. But there's some hows that have to come out of this and kind of codify that of it. That would allow, so if the Army warfighting concept says, here is how we think we in fact will do counter drone, or in terms of your sacred cows, what does maneuver look like in in a battlefield where we're not going to be doing the left flanking out of the desert anymore? What does that mean? Having that kind of document come down, having these things in place to allow us to do it from the ground up. I think there's been a general acceptance and like, I think there's belief now that if we can set some of these frameworks and the concepts and give the how, well, that at least gives the people who need that information the ability to challenge it, prove it wrong, and make the adjustments, which we weren't always prepared to do in the past. It was kind of like, well, it will be adaptive, it will be dispersed, you will operate, good luck to you.
Right.
Whereas now, I think it'll be, some of these feedback loops will be say, well, hold on here. Yeah, you wrote this and we need these drones, you say to use it in this way. Well, all of our feedback is saying to adjust and go this way. And I think the mechanisms will be in place to allow us to do that better. It's not going to solve your equipment delivery, I don't think. I think that's still going to be an issue, but at least the ability to kind of have both, the top down, making sure that what the Army is doing is nested inside everything else that, the CAF needs to be able to do in the way we want to fight. But at the same time that we're not just imposing a way and then saying, get on with it. There will be some mechanisms in place to allow us to adjust at the lowest level. At least that's my hope as this thing kind of moves forward, is the right things are moving initially to allow the lower levels to kind of grab onto this and make the adjustments iteratively as we need to.
Would you say, Jeff, that within your position in Chief Force Development right now, that the Army is well aligned with the future of the Canadian Armed Forces and where we're moving?
I would say that they are. I just see who's watching on the call here. Yeah, well, good to go. Good to go. We'll take you at your word.
I can elaborate on that because that was my last job.
Yeah, the answer is 100% yes, but there's some areas where if we actually get into what we think the modern battlefield will look like, I think some of the areas is how, if you're a land soldier And if you're a sergeant, you may now be having, and this is like you might be shooting stuff out of the air that actually has an impact on the battle, or you might be supporting an ATACMS missile that is controlling sea lines of communication. Like the way in which we're going to be asking our soldiers to do stuff is no longer just going to be about, the fight right in front of you. Every single organization is going to have a depth fight and have to think about a depth fight more than they've had to in the past. And so I think the Army is adapting to that well. I think the capabilities are moving in that way. And I'll leave it to you to say no and completely disagree with you.
No, I agree. So like what I was going to add was I actually think that the issue at hand right now, and you brought it up, it's the interoperability or the integration that has to occur as part of the Canadian Armed Forces. But right now, the Army is ahead, and that's the friction point that exists. The Army commander is being bold. He's taking decisive mechanisms to push us forward, and we're pushing forward faster than others are. So there's going to have to be a level of iteration that happens as we integrate as equipment comes online in the Navy and the Air Force, which is going to mean we're going to have to adapt ourselves in 3-5 years, whatever that may be. But that doesn't mean that what we're doing right now is wrong. We're all pushing on a bearing north. We just might be northwest, but we're going in the right direction. And it's better to adjust than be going south. And that is the key. The Army is clearly moving forward in the right direction, because we're looking at the future warfare. We're looking at threats, and we're looking at making ourselves capable to win, not only to survive, but to win on a battlefield of our choosing. And that I think is paramount to a cultural change and to a purpose that has to resonate in every soldier.
Yeah, thanks for that, sir. So we went into a little bit of the higher level modernization, how it's nested into strategy, how it's nested in the Canadian Armed Forces plan. And you've all talked about how it's hitting our soldiers at the cultural level. They're starting to see the shift in our language and our mindset back into a war fighting, threat focused mindset. What are the communications gaps right now for the troops? What are the troops wondering about? What is not clear to them about Canadian Army modernization, do you think, right now? Because it's simple enough for us three to come out of Ottawa and talk about this, but you have the ground truth that our soldiers are interested in. And I'm wondering if I can help dispel any rumors.
I think a little bit is we're about to change our regimental trajectory a little bit. From 25 years ago, that the last change happened in about mid-90s, where we came back from Germany. We became an experimentation 1090 organization. Then we carried onwards the way we are right now, which is under our 3 battalions commanded by 2 CMBG. And 26, we're about to change that slightly, right? Right. By command relationships of our 3rd battalion will fall under a different L3. So I think there's a little bit of uncertainty. And this, we were just talking about this in the hallway about how that identity is built for that organization. It might not be that important to some people, but it's huge at the soldier level in their sense of belonging to a formation. Like, what does that really mean? That carries a long way. So that's exciting times for that formation. If they get to build something from the ground up, that command. And I compared it to, because we were all here witnessing CSOR from birth, how they created a pretty amazing community, right? And everybody that's been posted to that organization knows how you feel a sense of belonging, even as a supporter. When you're posted to Can Softcom, how they indoctrinate you into the community, and how they make you, even as a supporter, not a badged operator, want to serve in those organizations.
I can talk to a little bit. Is there anyone else that wants to add to that conversation before I provide some of my context? Yeah, sir, Major.
Add a little bit, sir. Yeah, identity definitely is one of the things like we talked about and what that's going to look like in the future. And also, from a soldier's perspective, long-term like financial concerns, right? With the way this modernization is going, obviously, like everyone's mind is around that. Money is good now. What happens a few years down the road? That's always a concern for everyone, as well as purpose, right? Every soldier wants to know, what their purpose is. So it's hard to envision. We know how fourth generation works right now. and like how we're force employed with the mission sets that we have. So, the big question there is like, what will we be doing? How will we be force employed in this new construct? Because again, that falls back onto the purpose of the soldier, right? Which are those are the big, like, I think, key questions, right? That people are wondering, right? It's good to understand that we're going to be like a light brigade, but what does that mean, right? Like,
Yeah, I'm gonna take a stab at that, and we'll keep the conversation going. So let's start with identity. And so there's a lot of parts about identity, but what I can tell you at the Army headquarters is, so you said that some people might not find it important, and I'm sure there are people out there, but rest assured at the Army headquarters, we know how important it is. The Army commander, the Army sergeant major are heavily invested into this because we know that this is an aspect of the profession of arms. Our history and our heritage and our traditions is a lot of who we are and our identity. And so we are working. So we have some key allies in this fight. One is you'll all know Lieutenant Colonel Brian Summers. Brian Summers is in our G1 shop, invested in this as part of his role as G1 Ops. And then he is working hand in hand with none other than Chief Warrant Officer Mike Martins in Directorate of History and Heritage to make sure that this is all aligned across the Army. So the commander received a back brief last week on nomenclature. And what is going to be the naming convention of all these things and what is going to be the history and heritage, all of this stuff. And the discussion was very diverse. None of that is releasable yet. They're going to do it very deliberately. But the conversation has been had. The next portion is wrapping that all up with DHH and then pushing out the information to the troops because it's one of our constant questions that we get. So that talks about identity. When we talk about purpose, I can't help but think one key aspect of Army modernization is that alignment of purpose. So not only within 2 Brigade and the Light Infantry Regiment, but also within the Maneuver Division. So that culture needs to be set within the Maneuver Division now as well, that is accepting all of these mechanized brigade groups and the Light Infantry Regiment, 6 CCSB, the new Fires Brigade, the new Sustainment Brigade into this Maneuver Division, headquartered out of Edmonton, but accepting all these diverse cultures from across Canada into it. So it'll be set there with General Rutland and the team, but then down in 2 Brigade for our purposes and the Light Infantry Regiment. I think the way that I'm reading the tea leaves is the commander and the Army staff will do what needs to happen from like a policy perspective with DHH to make sure everything's aligned. But then they're really relying on those new command teams to do their analysis, and whoever the new Sergeant Major and Commander of the Light Infantry Regiment will have to do that for the Light Infantry Regiment and back brief General Rutland and back brief the commander to say, hey, this is where we're moving with the Light Infantry Regiment with regards to our identity and our culture. But certainly the alignment of purpose within those two organizations, it's a great time to be not only in the RCR, I think, but and in the Maneuver Division, but we have members of the 4th Battalion online with us right now. And it is an excellent time to be in the Canadian Army Reserves as well. Because when you think of the Defense of Canada Division, I think it's easy for people to think of domestic response as floods and fires. And that is but one aspect. But the priority for the Defense of Canada Division is literally the territorial defense of Canada. And so our latest Canadian Army sit rep has a letter from the Army Sergeant Major and the Commander of the Army directed at the Army Reserves, explaining that purpose to the Army Reserve and that noble task to not only provide that territorial defense of Canada to augment maneuver forces as tactical entities, but also to answer those requests for assistance for security from the Government of Canada. So I think Army modernization in a nutshell gives us alignment of purpose like we haven't seen in the last 30 years. The last thing I'll say before I hand off the microphone is with employment. So specific, I know a lot of people here in our community are interested in the Light Infantry Regiment. And so from my understanding, the Light Infantry Regiment headquarters will stand up this summer, APS 26. under a new commander and a sergeant major and kind of a skeleton staff. I think it's under 20. You might know more than I do, but it's between like 12 and 20. And the headquarters will be located here in Petawawa, and it will respond to the maneuver division. And then once that headquarters hits IOC, then the battalions will fall under that headquarters, and then they will be employed underneath the new light infantry regiment for all of its tasks, including the Global Response Task Force. So we're moving in the right direction, but the commander is really going to wait for that light infantry regiment headquarters to have everything that they need sorted out, so that they can declare IOC, bring the battalions underneath it, and be able to force generate the forces required for CJOC to employ on behalf of Canada. I had a bunch of questions with regards to the stand up of the light infantry regiment and kind of soldier sentiment about that. Where do you think, and this is a question for anyone, where do you think in modernization and writ large that fitness falls into this? This is a discussion I always like bringing into the conversation. When we talk about the evolution of the battle space, how are our soldiers and our leaders taking fitness into equation?
I'll weigh into this one. So whether it's physical fitness, mental fitness, or intellectual fitness, I think it is paramount to modernization, and for all intents and purposes, it's been paramount for our tactical necessity for my entire career, and then the entire career of everyone who served before us. Things have slipped away a little bit over the last couple years, and the reason why is you just talked about it. We didn't have purpose. There wasn't a sense of rationale as what we were doing. And I think that right now you can see the impetus with Army modernization and the fact that we are getting back to core warfighting skills, that no one can deny that fitness can either enable or disable a tactical formation. If we're talking about fighting alongside our peer in a trench, in a defensive against a peer enemy, if we are not fit to fight, whether it's physical fitness, mentally agile, or intellectually capable to understand a situation and what my boss needs from me, or what the person next beside me needs from me, and I'm physically able to deliver that, then I am a hindrance to my team. And I think we have to get back to that aspect of fitness not being about personal discipline, but about what I do to contribute to the larger team. Me being fit doesn't just make me feel good. It helps my buddy in my trench beside me. It helps my platoon commander. It helps my unit be more effective in the battle space.
Yeah, love it. For our NCOs, what are you seeing a drive towards, I guess, holistic fitness, but also but a focus on physical fitness within the battalions, and are leaders enabled to ensure that their soldiers are not a liability on the battle space and are maintaining physical fitness?
I'll go pretty broad at this. In the last week, we received a roll-up from the Sergeant Major downrange, the Brigade Sergeant Major downrange. I could shared it with the officer cohort. I could share it even broader. And one of the main points that he noticed in his roll-up was, comparatively, they have 13 countries in their brigade, and we were the least fit. So that has a distinct effect on our credibility on an international stage. And I think, we talk about it all the time in all of our groups that have been associated with recently, and we really need to make some changes in the way we value fitness and how important is it other than passing the force test every year.
Yeah.
Many different ways we can tackle this, right? One example, L4 units have lost the ability, reg force have lost the ability to test their own members. Again, one small example, but where we've become completely dependent on PSP. Nothing against, I'm not casting shade on PSP, but when a unit can't test their own members, or they could train for it, but evaluating, we should enable units to do so. I'm trying to come up with creative ways to improve this situation. Another way, can we incentivize fitness a little bit more?
Yeah.
Not awards or wearables or financial, but make it career oriented. Could we? There's different ways we could look at partner countries and see what's worked for them and what hasn't worked, and develop something that could be better for us. But we have to do more. Like, we must do more with regards to fitness. Colonel Summerfield explained it. Can be more clear. Like, we could rarely will we operate by ourselves on a international operation, and if we are, like, our existing operators tell us that we are the least fit amongst our partner nations, and several who are much smaller than we are. We need to really reflect on that as an organization and try to make some improvements.
Mr. McSpadden, you wanted to add some?
I'm biting at the bullet on this one. This was first off, sorry, you hit the nail on the head, and that's been, I think, the message we've been trying to instill in 3rd Battalion. You need to be fit to fight, and if you're not fit to fight, you're actually putting the man or woman beside you in your team at risk. You do become that liability. We actually hosted CO 3rd Battalion, and I hosted a town hall here recently. One of the points that come up in our suggestion box was in a roundabout way calling out the fact that, hey, the force test is the standard. And but the Met standard is Met standard, and that essentially that should be it. Our message was very clear to the battalion that do you really want to go into war having just met the standard? Do you think that's going to pass the mail when you're faced against an enemy? Is Met standard the mentality we want to take into that? The other one I want to touch on real quickly, and I'm glad that where I think we are making progress, but we have, where I see is some of a unit, the major challenges we're faced with. One, physical fitness, as we've alluded to, it's tied to mental well-being, physical well-being. It's a healthy lifestyle. It's understanding about how we present the best versions of ourselves. And that's just not running every day or rucking every day. That's also things like how we educate our people, how we eat, getting a good night's sleep. All of this combines into how effective we can be in putting the best version of ourselves forward. One of the things that's challenging right now, and I think I don't want to derail the conversation, but part of overall fitness, we are facing real challenges today with things like addictions, with things like people just becoming accustomed to a certain way of life here in garrison. That does not translate well when we take them down range and they don't have those dependencies. Anyway, things that we need to continue to work on and push the ball forward and identify how we as a leadership can encourage overall fitness, not just physical fitness.
Yeah, that's really well said, RSM. This is a conversation that comes up in the town halls and the engagements that I do a lot as well. And when I'm faced with that question from a lot of audiences, it's easy for us to say, okay, here are the resources at our disposal with regards to physical fitness, mental fitness, spiritual fitness. But the other aspect that we all are part of is that we're part of a regimental family. And as a regiment, we have a say in that too, of setting the culture and the identity that is important to us as the Royal Canadian Regiment. And I always try to articulate to people who aren't in the military what that means with regards to a regimental family that is watching out for you, that can see that kind of like change in your mentality, change in your well-being, and being able to act on it. I'm seeing at the higher level, the iron's hot with regards to where Mr. Robin, as the Army Sergeant Major, and how he looks at this. I really think the conversation needs to continue and continue to be pressed from the NCO Corps. Mr. Robin is a huge advocate for all of you in Ottawa, and I think if you all continue to go full court press on it, we'll continue to get the traction that is needed, because we need to keep the traction on it. We're getting into the last like 25 minutes of the session here. I'm going to open it up for anyone to have any comments that they want to add, but I want to open up to those online if you have any questions for myself and the panel. So let's go online. Let's see what we have.
Oh, sorry, can you hear me?
Yeah, we got you loud and clear.
Awesome. Introduce myself first. I'm the 4th Battalion RTMS here in London, Ontario there. And it shout out to the RSR podcast. I enjoyed it regularly there on YouTube. I just had a question there for the reserve side here. I'm wondering for the modernization, if there's any sort of changes coming towards the employment of the reserves, whether it's legislation or ability to protect those working civilian employee jobs away from the military.
Yeah, it's a great question, Sarge. So I'm going to hit it first, and I'll see if anyone else in the room has anything to add. So with Army modernization, and one of my key jobs when this all started was making sure that I used General Wright kind of like a precise weapon system. And we just sent him on an engagement strategy, talking to all the key players to make sure that this was a tight plan and was well understood. Part of that conversation, specifically with our deputy minister, was with regards to potential legislation changes affecting our Army Reserve and our protecting our Army Reserve employment as they are tasked to complete tasks under the Defence Canada Division. So I don't have all the details towards that, but rest assured it is part of the conversation. We know for our Army Reserve to do the tasks that will be expected of them under the Defence of Canada Division, that there will have to be changes. That allow you to have job security, that allow you to do your job to defend Canada while maintaining that job security. So the conversation is continuing, and it's all happening at higher levels in the Army headquarters and in the CAF. And it's not a problem set just specific to the Canadian Army. It is specific across the CAF in the Navy and the Air Force as well, as they look to use their reserve forces in new ways through CAF modernization. Jeff, you want to add to that?
Yeah, the only thing I'll add on that is I think this is part of the broader discussion. We talk about all like the other parts of the reserve as well, of like, if we're talking about a 300,000 person either mobilization or supplementary or a national reserve, like there's pieces of this that I think people understand, that if we talk about, up to 100,000 for the primary reserve, up to 300,000 on various lists in some way, that hasn't been developed fully yet, and nor has the allocation between the Army, the Navy, the Air Force. If CAFs, if Cybercom has a reserve force, what will that look like? Some of those conversations are still ongoing. And I think like everyone recognizes there's the opportunity to look back and say, okay, if the CAF says we have to do this, and if the Army's roles in Defence of Canada Division is X, Y, or Z, then what other adjustments do we need to make with this while we're making the tweaks to the other reserve components? And so all that to say, like, I'm just adding on to basically say, like, this is part of the broad discussion. I will comment that the legislative piece, I look back through like 7 different reserve initiatives. Someone has tried to change that legislation 7 times. So 8th time's a charm. We're going to give her a go, but that's kind of where it sits right now. Everyone acknowledges this is a massive problem in terms of being able to, bring out the reserve force and use and employ the reserve force when we need it.
So again, great question. Rest assured that it is understood at all the highest levels, and they are working that problem space. The resources I can orient you on are the latest Army Modernization SITREP. As I stated, there's a letter in there from the Army Commander and the Army Sergeant Major outlining a ton of information directed right at the Army Reserve. I think it's a great resource to let you know what tasks you can expect, both for the primary and the supplementary reserve, from a tactical, operational, and strategic reserve perspective, and how that fits into the Defence of Canada. And then another resource that actually, for everyone listening, that just came on the streets. So the CDAI, the Canadian Defence Association Institute, has a podcast. They just released an episode last week that has a member that we would all recognize, Colonel Howard Coombs, was interviewed on there. And they're talking about the reserves, and they're talking about mobilization. And it's a great podcast that kind of gets to the strategy behind Army Reserve modernization. Does that answer your question, Sarge? Do you have a follow-up question?
No, that's really good for the answer there. Thank you, sir. Follow-up question I'm wondering about, again, with the modernization for the reserves and the regular Army there. Knowing that part of our job with the reserves is to backfill the regular army, we do lack equipment that our regular force counterparts do have, along with qualifications, stuff like that. I'm just wondering, is there a plan for the reserve force as well to get caught up on the equipment and sort of training qualification that we may be missing here in the reserves as well?
Yeah, so there's a pretty comprehensive modernization initiative happening within the training system as well, to make sure that we get people through the training pipeline faster and into units to be employed quicker. So that's all happening through the Canadian Army Doctrine and Training Center and in our training centers across Canada for both the reserve forces as well as the regular forces. And we're taking a new kind of look at it. And instead of looking strictly at the occupational functional point, we're looking at something called an employment, I believe it is, EFP, employment functional point, to make sure that everyone, as soon as you're done basic military qualification, knows how to shoot, move, communicate, apply first aid, shoot down a drone, and then you are officially EFP qualified and can be employed in certain regards within our units. So that is one thing. And then there's other aspects to our training that is modernizing. With regards to equipment and systems, so the primary task within the Defense of Canada division will be exactly that. When the government calls, you will be the first call with regards to our territorial defense and augmented as required by the maneuver division for specialist capabilities. And you'll be outfitted for that. The other aspect that'll be one of your roles and responsibilities is tactical augmentation to the maneuver division for both expeditionary operations as well as domestic operations. And the way that that is being looked at is within I believe it's CARB, a Combined Arms Reserve Battalion, that all of our reserve forces under the Defense Canada Division will be responsible to force generate for employment within the maneuver division. And so there will have to be a level of interoperability of both equipment and training between our regular forces and our reserve forces to make that happen. Jeff, you had something to add to it?
Yeah, on top of that, so in terms, the target one here is always on timelines. So right now, SJS is looking at mobilization planning. And so, what does that actually mean? And the question they're trying to get to is, and it gets to your point of when do we see equipment? Well, we basically have to answer the question first of how ready do we want certain portions to be? So how ready does the primary reserve need to be? And like all the points Cullen has brought up about, this many carbs on this short notice with this equipment to support the maneuver division versus possibly Defensive Canada elements that are organized more with counter UAS sabotage type tasks, that element. Those conversations are happening and will probably happen over the next 6 months to a point where someone will start making some firm decisions at higher levels in terms of like senior leadership that could then cascade down in a way that will enable the Army to start passing some like more firm direction. So in the meantime, I think like that is a solid warning order of like, this is the way things are moving. And then, once someone starts saying, okay, yeah, like, this 300,000 person reserve, 5 days of training is sufficient with no equipment. The the defense industrial plan will make your equipment while we train you versus, you at 4RCR are saying, okay, you guys are actually on the hook for this portion of the carb at this time.
Yeah.
And so that is a bad answer to say, hopefully in the next 6 months, there'll be more information, but they're looking at different ways of doing business, like the cascading of equipment, like something we haven't done in a long time, whereby if you have equipment, can that be cascaded down so that you don't always have to have, where does your stuff go after you use it in the regular force? Doesn't mean the reserves get, lesser equipment. It's possibly that if we're doing this faster and we're more innovative, then perhaps the equipment turns over quicker and we're not giving the reserves second-rate equipment past its second life potential because we're actually creating stuff faster. So all that to say, there's a lot of kind of like things up in the air when you may start to get different equipment in different roles. But I think like we will start moving that way very fast. And I think like there will be decisions made before mobilization is done anyway. And so all that to say is that's a broader picture of what's happening. The Army hasn't waited for anybody else to get moving anything. I don't think they're going to wait on this either. So I'm hoping the answer is like sooner than what I've just said, but remains to be seen.
And those that period of transition will be the same within the Maneuver Division and 2 Brigade, the Light Infantry Regiment, and for our Reserve Forces in the Defence Canada Division. The good news is all of us are going to be operationally focused on specific mission sets, and that's a good thing. Hey, thanks for that question, Sarge. Joe, you had a acting CO of the 1st Battalion. Do you have a question?
Yeah, I did have one question having read through the modernization order. 2 points kind of struck out other than the obvious things, and they were about downloading more vehicle maintenance responsibilities and signals training to end users. Do you have any inclination as to, or any indication as to how far that's going to go? And B, your interpretation of how that's going to affect us in our training, knowing that we already have some frictions getting our troops up to the level that we would see them requiring to go fight in conventional operations, knowing that that's balanced with it's going to improve our capabilities at large.
Oh, you're putting me on the spot, Joe. I don't have a great answer for you. What I would say is in every conversation that we talk about our gaps, signals and vehicle technicians are within every single one of those conversations. When we talk about our personnel gaps that relate also to capability gaps, it's those two trades are hit every time. What I would offer, Joe, because it's not my area of expertise, is that please submit that question through the Q&A portal on the digital SITREP, and it'll come to me in Army headquarters, and I will make sure that I get someone in Army headquarters to answer it in the next digital SITREP that will be published in March. Does anybody have yeah, Colonel Summerfield's gonna take a stab at it?
No, I got nothing on this, but it actually goes to the point. Like my number one point that I wanted to come here and talk to is exactly demonstrated, and it was demonstrated in the way that Major Cullen Downey here answered the question. Major Cullen Downey here answered the question with a little bit of humbleness and the fact that he didn't know the answer, and that is going to permeate throughout modernization for the next half a decade. And I think that that is one of the key things that we all have to understand at the chain of command, from every level, from the private right up to the colonel, is that there's going to be times that this is messy. It's not going to implement in a picture perfect way. So that means that there's going to be a young master corporal that goes on a course that comes back and has more relevant TTPs than the warrant in their platoon does, because that's the way it gets taught, or vice versa, where the unit knows more about what the school is going. And we're going to have to listen. We're going to have the confidence to have the dialogue, and we're going to have the internal humility to actually understand that what we know based on our experience may not be relevant anymore. And that goes to that growth mindset or a culture of learning that is fundamental to modernization. If we are not intellectually moving forward, then modernization will not happen. Otherwise, it's just a bunch of equipment that we're going to misuse or not use to its total capacity. And that's why I talked about the opportunity to say goodbye to these sacred cows, say goodbye to our biases, and actually embrace this and embrace the ugliness as an opportunity to learn. And I think that that's like, Joe, your question is point on. There's an expertise that question has to be solved, and we don't have an answer today, but we will. And we just have to be patient and understand that we're going to have to flag these issues, and we have to have the confidence to flag these issues up the chain of command. So that humbleness, that assertiveness, that dialogue is going to be quintessential.
Thanks, sir. Is there any other questions from those online? And if you've already asked a question, feel free to ask another one.
Sir, it's Scott Markle, of course, here. I'm the ad chair right now. Yeah, so as the Army is changing rapidly, it seems like we are getting good info flow. A lot of the info is getting passed on really well to the troops, and this podcast, I know, is helping our members a lot as well. I just wondered if anyone could speak to the future organization of one CMBG. I noticed in the org chart you provided, it's noted as Hemi-Cav, where the other CMBGs are going to be mechanized infantry. And just curious what that's going to look like in the future.
Yeah, I think you're referring to the Orbat slide I showed at the beginning. So obviously within one CMBG, they have the bulk of our armored forces, right? So our tanks. So that's the key differentiation, is that one CMBG has our tanks. And our other CMBGs with the RCD and 12 RBC in Quebec will have medium cavalry capability. And that platform isn't yet procured. But it is a priority capital project for the commander to make sure that we get a medium cavalry system into those other armored units. But to answer your question, one CMBG has our tanks, and that's why they have the heavy capability. Okay, we've got about 5 minutes left. I just want to give an opportunity for anyone here on the panel, if there's anything that you wanted to bring up, if there's anything that we missed that you wanted to talk about. Sergeant Major? You're all right, Mr. Seelock? Oh, yeah.
I guess I could. No, I think a big key is going to be the leadership perspective on how this gets messaged forward, right? A lot of it is the mentality going forward, and how we message this to the troops, because the way we are moving forward is definitely a good way. And one thing, I wrote this down, and it's kind of cliche because I'm one of the old dogs here, but a lot of the things we discussed, like physical fitness, everything is nested, I think, within discipline, which is one of the things I think we need to adhere to. And I don't mean the old school discipline, but it's the getting up every day, hitting the PT, right? It's the things you do day in and day out. That is gonna create good soldiers down the road, right? So just want to throw that out there. But
Our regiment's well known for creating good leaders. I think moving into another evolution of the RCR, we continue developing and building leaders and building cohesive teams the way we have done and continue to do so, but with an open mind for accepting uncertainty in the future, and being able to think about our leader development model and how we value, it's stated at the CAF at the highest level, right? How we value attributes and competencies, how we balance that scale of character-based leadership with competencies attached to it. And that'll help us with developing leaders to be successful in the future.
Yeah, when I think of this entire plan, the one thing that worries me is that if you don't have the messaging on this and you're just reading the slide deck, it sounds like we're creating a whole bunch of headquarters and equipment will come later. So when you just see it on the outside, so the messaging side of this, I think, remains critical. And the key piece of, being able both to report up, so from the chain of command perspective at the unit level, actually being able to capture what changes are occurring. So when we do force development, it's not just about changing the organization and getting new equipment. The doctrine side largely comes from people, or at least lately has been bottom up. And so for every time that we announce a higher headquarters, we should probably announce some type of doctrinal adjustment that's been made at the lowest grassroots level. Otherwise, we risk, a misinformation of this basically being look how many new brigade headquarters we created. But, we haven't bought, oh, by the way, we didn't buy you any equipment yet because that's coming in 5 years, because that's harder to do, which is that's just not the answer. That's not what we're doing. We're doing both of these at the same time. I think the messaging side of it's critical. And I think at the leadership level within the unit, that's going to be important. One, to say, empower that innovation, but at the same time to message it up so that people can see the types of things that are happening. The work that Duke's company is doing inside Latvia right now in terms of setting up the defense position, how it looks differently. They've done that, with new equipment, yes, but it's been done in a way that modernization didn't tell them to do that necessarily. And so it's a bit of both sides of it, messaging the bottom, top down, saying, here's how we're adjusting, and bottom up, here's how we're refining.
Mr. McSpadden, you're good? Colonel Summerfield?
I think the one thing left to say is that there's a lot of work to do from every single person in the Army and in the regiment to make this successful. This is not going to succeed if we just sit on our thumbs and we just wait for things to happen. There's an impetus for all of us to start thinking about what we think that the Army needs and to start working towards that end. It means that if you're a young officer, that you have to start looking into doctrine and refining your warfighting capabilities at the platoon level. If you're a sergeant, you have to master all elements of a section. From the soldier, it's about mastering your drills and your skills. We can't be complacent. Army modernization requires us to be ready for war fighting. It's not about participation. It's not about waving a flag. And I think that if we take that and we take the I out of it and we start thinking about the team, what can we do to better enable the team to be a better war fighting section, platoon, company, battalion, and ask ourselves, are we doing everything that we can? And if the answer is yes, then we've done our job. If the answer is no, then we got some self-reflection and we can start putting in a little bit more work. That's what's going to make the difference between a mediocre implementation and one that gets us to war fighting quicker.
Yeah, thanks for that. I'll try to hit on everything that you guys brought up in the final words here in my closing comments. So first, Sergeant Major, what you said about battlefield discipline. I think as I hear about this, and I take pride in our regiment with our motto of never pass a fault, because I think there was a few years where we kind of like, when we said never pass a fault, we were thinking in that traditional like parade ground in scarlets, shiny boots, white pith helmet, and like that's never pass a fault. Never pass a fault in the current battle space means like battlefield discipline, or else you're dead. When you talk about discipline, not only with regards to making sure that our troops are in the right mental, physical, and spiritual health, but also within battlefield discipline, I think is important, and it's an important component of modernization. And then Mr. Seelock, what you said about like working through the uncertainty together, that's what this initiative is all about, making sure that we can provide communication down and into our soldiers, to our entire regimental family, and also encouraging that innovation on the ground, and the entrepreneur mentality of the infantry. Jeff, you brought up how critical the messaging aspect is. Again, within the regiment, great initiative from the corporals we have in the room behind the scenes here for the podcast team to get the word out to our audience, but also within the Army. Make use of the resources that are being pushed down. Submit your questions, because we're trying to flatten the hierarchy so that we can hear directly from you and answer the questions, and we understand the gaps at Army headquarters. I saw a great wrap up of battlefield tactical lessons learned from the brigade sergeant major in Latvia. I'm sure you've seen it by now. He wrapped up all from NCO perspective of the lessons learned in Latvia. And it just dropped in Army headquarters, and we're going to blast it out to the Army because it is relevant, timely information. And then your final comments, sir, about modernization and the part we all have to play within the Army. I spoke in my initial comments in the presentation about personnel, equipment, training, and sustainment, how it's important at the soldier level to enable the soldier, and then all the way up through the echelon, now for the first time, to that division level warfighting. And for us, within the Royal Canadian Regiment, within the soon-to-be Light Infantry Regiment, within 2 Canadian Mechanized Brigade Group, within Defence of Canada Division, within the Maneuver Division, how can we shoot, move, communicate, make sure our soldiers are more lethal and more survivable? That is the stuff we need to be focused on. So I want to take the time to thank all of you for participating in the panel. Thank you for those online that were with us today. Thank you to our podcast listeners. Continue to subscribe. Corporal Moreau and Corporal Wallace, the background crew, continuing to crush it for us at the RCR Association podcast. Thank you. Happy holidays. Our regimental birthday is coming up. I hope you're able to celebrate and mark that occasion with friends, family, and fellow soldiers. Pro Patra.